Okay, so I think we can start now. Once again, I would like to thank you all for joining here today for this presentation, for these Hangout sessions. I'd like to thank you also for RDI for giving the chance to talk about this cool subject, which is Swagger. And so let's start. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Gabriel. I'm one of the developers here on RDI. I'm currently working on the NPS transformation project, and I can say that in this project we are using a lot of Swagger and OpenAPI configuration. So that's why I started this movement to bring some information about Swagger for you guys. Okay. I'm gonna pass to our agenda. First of all, I'd like to say this for this presentation, we are gonna cover only the basics for Swagger and OpenAPI. Okay. Uh, it's a very extensive and cool subject that has a lot of information and a lot of study material. So I recommend if you want to check out more about these tools, you can check my reference the reference material that I put on the final slide in this presentation. Okay, so basically uh, we are gonna cover the definition. What is the Swagger? We can talk about Swagger without talking about OpenAPI. So I'm gonna cover also the definitions. What is OpenAPI? The basic structure of an API file, or OpenAPI file. Okay, and how we can actually use and customize the Swagger API in our day-to-day. And for the last but not least, a live demo, which I will with a very simple example API, I will show how to we actually can install and configure Swagger for us to customize and use in API example. Okay, and for the two, the reference, and if you guys have any doubts, please feel free to insert in the comment box. That after that I will gladly reply to you all. Okay. So, first of all, what is the Swagger? By the definition, the site definition, Swag is a set of an open source tools built around the OpenAPI specification that can help us to design, build, document, and consume REST APIs. It was built by Smart Bear Software, which is behind some of the biggest names of the software space like Swagger, SoapUI, and QNC Complete. Okay, these tools are very useful. I think everybody here already know how powerful SoapUI is for us that is developing using REST services or even SOAP services. Okay, and as I said, Swagger has a toolbox, very nice, which we can define by this one. So we have like the Swagger editor, which is a browser-based editor where you can write OpenAPI specifications. The Swagger UI, which is a cool, powerful tool that can renders OpenAPI specification as interactive OpenAPI documentation. Okay, the Swagger code gen, which generates server stubs and client libraries for an OpenAPI specification, and the most powerful one, which is the Swagger Hub, that is a platform that contains all this information that I just told, the Swagger editor, the Swagger UI, the Swagger code gen, and you can actually is like you can put like a collection of all your APIs and all your models inside this Swagger Hub. So it's a real cool, powerful tool. Okay, but as you can see, I talk a lot about Swagger, but I also talk about a lot of what is OpenAPI specification. So what is OpenAPI specification? Uh, the OpenAPI specification is an API description format for REST APIs. Okay, It was formerly called Swagger Specification, but it became so popular that it was like a decouple from the Swagger environment. It was created like an OpenAPI specification because uh, it's it gets independent of this Swagger, okay, the Swagger toolbox, okay. So, what is so nice about OpenAPI specifications? The OpenAPI specification is very cool because it's the middle term between the machine and the human capable of read the file. Okay, so with OpenAPI, we can actually write files in JSON or YAML, and these files you get a lot of information about your REST API. Okay, things like map all the available endpoints and operation of each endpoints, like get users, post users, delete users, and things like that. Operation parameters input and output for each operation, which is basically our request and response for each of operation that we would like to use in our REST method and operations. Authentication methods, and also all kinds of information about our services. Things like content information, license, terms of use, and etc. So why is so cool that we use OpenAPI today? I think I can speak to myself and also by a lot of developers and everybody who works here with specification and mostly API services, that in the early days when we are going to create or even consume a REST API, we always come across with some set of like a URL and then some big and a lot of paper for us to read with the documentation explaining what will be the request, how is going to be the response, things like what will be the status message for, I don't know, for a created, all the messages that the application can return. And it's a very expressive job to you read and understand it, and after that you actually have to implement these kind of things. And with OpenAPI, we can actually do both in the same time, because OpenAPI basically translates informations like our operations in the controllers, our data notations, our decorators, and things like that to a language that can be readable both for us and both for machines, which is the JSON or YAML. Okay. In this next slide, I will present some example of OpenAPI file structure that you can see that it's very easy for us to understand. Okay, so in this next slide, as you can see, we have a basic structure of an OpenAPI file. Okay, so as you can see, we have all the things that is important for us when we are going to build or even consume an API. Things like basic information. So here we can see what schemes will be used. It's going to be HTTP or HTTPS. Uh, the controllers and the path that is going to be used, like I'm going to have this path here. It's going to be a path. This is an example. This example is in JSON, okay? So we have a path used by path, and actually the operations, the description of the operations, like what's it going to do, like add a new patch to the store, what's going to be the operation ID, what will be consuming, what kind of information it will be consuming. For in this example, we can see it's going to be an application JSON and an application XML. And we will also produce the producers, like it's going to return a message or a class in application XML or even in an application in JSON. So all this kind of information is very useful for developers, QAs, testers, and everybody who wants to understand how the API is running. Okay. And also we can see a lot of parameters here. So actually we can define what will be the parameters that we are going to use for this operation. For example, here we have a class called pet for this example, and we have the description saying that it's the pet object that needs to be added to the store. Okay, so here we are looking into this. We already can say that we have parameters of information about producers and consumers. Okay, and also we can actually uh, display what's going to be our responses, our HTTP responses. For this example, it's only using the 405, which is an invalid input. But we can also put our successful answers like 200, accepted, or okay, or everything we wanted. Okay. Uh, and also it's like we can easily put our security, so what kind of authentication we'd like to use for write, read, and things like that. Okay, so the OpenAPI basic structure of a file is very easy for us to understand and also for the machines to understand. We can actually we came across when we are working with OpenAPI. We have two paths that we like to follow. We can actually start to firstly writing the OpenAPI file and then getting implemented, or even after we have the implementation, we are going to put the OpenAPI basic structure in the already developed software. Okay, so for us doing this, we have to actually put the information in our project, which will be the next topic, we which is how to use Swagger. So for us to use Swagger in our REST API, it's pretty easy. You have to do these three simple steps. First one is actually to download the Swashbuckle ASP.NET Core, which is the Swagger, okay? Swagger tools for document APIs built on ASP.NET Core. In this example, I will only talk about using in the C Sharp, but it's possible to look down for all other languages. I know it's acceptable in Java, JavaScript, in Node.js, and another ones which I can remember. Okay, for this presentation, I will follow the C Sharp uh, language. Okay, so the first step is to actually download the package from Nugget, which will be the Swashbuckle ASP.NET Core. And after downloaded, you have to add the generator of the Swagger in your configuration, which will be in the configured services here. Okay. And for the last, you can actually use the Swagger. So this one, you're going to add. The first one, you're going to install it, add, and for the last one, you're going to use it. So this configuration here in use. Okay, use Swagger and also use Swagger UI. This use Swagger UI is very important because defining this one is going to define the where it's going to be that where it's going to be created that JSON file that I already showed you guys. Okay. And after you do these three basic steps, when you start your application, it will already generate all the informations, all the basic informations about your REST API. Okay, these information will be generated through a UI, which is the Swagger UI, as you can see here. And in the next slide, I will explain what is this UI, what kind of information we can actually see it through, and how can we actually customize it. Okay, so this is the first thing when we're gonna run our application, we are going to see using Swagger. So in this case, as we can see, we have a lot of information that we can consume using this UI. We have information from the basic things like the name of the application and things more complex like description and info. We can actually go and put some information about what's going to be our services, what's going to be our service, what what kind of things he will do, if I want to get a hyperlink to contact the developer, if I have some terms of services that I'd like to the client to see it first, or even some hyperlink to find about more Swagger, like this example here, I can actually put this kind of information here. Okay, and it is nice to guys to know it that every time I generate this UI, this URL here, the swagger.json, is updated with the new information that I'm going to put inside my application. Okay, a very cool and very important thing that already the Swagger generates for us is the endpoints and the operation of each of our controller. So for every controller that is going to map it, so every controller that's going to be mapped here, you can see that as there is a set of a controller, which will be in this case the pet, okay, and every operation inside this controller. So we can see a post for upload an image of a pet, uh, uh, a post for add a new pet, a put for update an existing pet, or even a get, okay? And it's real nice because every time we kind of click in this box here, it will be collapsed to another set of information about this operation. Okay, so in the next slide, I will show you guys what kind of information it will display when we click it in the operation. Okay, which is this one. So every time I click on the operation, it will collapse in another big box here where you can find a lot of information about this operation, in this case in this get. So for this get, we can find the description here, what will be doing this operation. In this case, will be return a single pet. What will be the parameters that we have to pass it down for actually get the operation running. In this case, will be a pet ID. We can see here that we can add a lot of parameters here, okay, in a lot of data types, and we can get a lot of information using this parameter. So we can say that the name is a pet ID, is a required parameter, the data type is an integer, and is going to be coming from the path, not for query or header. Okay. And also we came across with this kind of information, the responses and the response types. So in here we can actually see what's going to be the response code for this operation. Here I can define what will be all the response codes for this operation, what will be the description for each of these description operation here, and I can actually put some JSON returning. So in this case, I'm going to return this JSON. So for every time I get a successful operation here, I'm going to actually return the 200 code. It's going to be a successful operation. This is going to be our JSON, okay? The JSON that we will put in the response. Okay, I can actually also define the types. So I can go here and define the types for it will be returning an application JSON, an application XML, or even an application text. Okay, so it's nice for everybody knows that for each of operation, a different set of information will be available for us to use using the Swagger UI. And I think the most important thing about this UI is this button here, the try it out. Because using the try it out, you can actually, when you click it, you can actually put all the parameters here and then execute it. You don't need to use any other, you don't have to use any other apps like Postman. So I don't know if SoapUI does a REST, but Postman or whatever other APIs. You don't have to use this. Even in your browser with the UI, you can actually click it and run it and see your application running. Okay, so it is very nice because it becomes more easy for everybody to get to know what kind of data, what kind of things your service is doing, because it's easy for us to get the information and also to execute it. Okay, very nice. And just to show you guys what kind of customization we can actually do in use Swagger, these are some information. Of course, as I said earlier, there are much more things we can do with Swagger, like versioning, authorization, and everything. But we are going to focus on these ones. So we're going to focus on API info and descriptions. The XML comments will be generated and will be like descriptions for each of our operations, data notations, response types, versioning, authorization, and much more. So with with Swagger, you can do a lot of things. Okay, it's a very nice tool. It's a very nice uh, package for you to add in your application. A fun fact is that Swagger is so much usable in your day-to-day that I think in .NET 5, when you create an example project for a REST API, it already comes installed the Swagger with the Swagger UI setup, so you don't have to even worry about that because Swagger is very usable for our community in C Sharp when the REST API is the subject. Okay, so for this presentation, I have prepared a live demo that I want to show you guys. It's a simple demo. I'm gonna basically, I have created an example of REST API using the traditional well-known Microsoft example of REST API, which is the weather forecast one. And in this example, I will show how actually install, configure it, and even customize Swagger. Okay, so let's get to it. If you guys have already a question, if you like to post, please feel free. Meanwhile, I'm getting the project ready here. Okay, so okay, okay. So for this live demo, I already created a REST API project. It's using .NET Core 3.1. Okay. I have this only controller here, which is the weather forecast controller. And we have the example of the Microsoft services when you created a REST API, which is the weather forecast controller. Okay. So for this example here, we can see that we have three operations, which will be a get, okay, which is basically getting information about our weather forecast, but is using like a random numbers, so it's not a very for sure weather forecast. It maybe come here like it's going to be hot today, but as we can see, it's a little bit windy and cold. Okay, so just to clarify, and I already created these two other operations, a post where it's going to receive information about the weather forecast, and get which will be receiving an information about a city from a query, and will be returning some basic string just saying it will be the the weather forecast random in the city name. For example, it will be chill in São Paulo. It will be hot in New York. Okay. For the sake of this presentation, I didn't focus on things like business logic and persistence data because I think it's not very helpful and it's going to be missed out the point, which is the Swagger. Okay, so as you can see here, we have it's not very complex, it's a very simple examples because I think it's not the point here to get complex and things like that. It's more to understand how Swagger works. Okay, and we are using also two kinds of classes here, the weather forecast one, which has all the information about the forecast, which will be date, time, date, the temperature in Celsius, the temperature in Fahrenheit, and the summary. And also the city, which has only one parameter, that is city name. Okay, so this application is already up and running. So let's just see here if I'm gonna hit weather forecast, it's already returning some information. But I want to get this information using the Swagger and using the OpenAPI specification. Okay, so the first thing I have to do for getting my Swagger in this application is actually install it. So for this, the first thing we have to do is come here in our tools, Nugget Pack Manager. We can use the console or the UI. For the sake of this explanation, I will use the UI. Okay, and we are gonna use this package here, which is Swashbuckle ASP. No, it's not Swashbuckle. It's running. This one, swashbuckle.aspnet core. Okay, this is the one that we're going to install it because when we're going to install it, this one, all this one are going to be added also. Okay, so Hangouts, Swagger API, I'm going to select it and going to install it here. I have to agree in this license. Okay, so I think it's already installed. As we can see here in our dependencies, we already have a package using Swashbuckle ASP.NET Core. Okay, and when we expand here, we can see the Swagger, SwaggerGen, Swagger UI, and the Microsoft Extension API Description Server. Okay, this will be the packages that we are going to use for this part of the project. Okay, so after we install it, we have to go here and actually add our information in Swagger. So I'm gonna here, sorry, on startup. In our configuration, we have to actually add Swagger. So services dot add SwaggerGen. Okay, and also in the configure, you have to go here and app use Swagger. And here we have to app use Swagger UI. And also we have to define what will be the Swagger endpoint that we are going to use it. So for this example, I'm gonna just put here slash Swagger. I'm gonna use v1 swagger.json, and what will be the name? I'm gonna put just Hangouts Swagger API. Okay, so just by doing these three simple steps, when you will run it, we can see that the Swagger UI will be already generated and getting all the information that we already have in our API. Okay, so I'm gonna do a simple change here in our launch settings, which is running using the weather forecast. I'm gonna just to run it using Swagger. So be the first page that is going to be running for this example. Okay, I'm gonna save it here, and let's get running. It's starting. So as we can see, this is the first version of our Swagger using the Swagger UI. We don't have much information. We only have the information about the controller, all the operation of that controller will be available for us, and what will be the schemas. In the schemas, you can see what will be the class that is capable for us to use for a request or for a response in even one of these operations. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is actually to look down in this file here, because all this is possible thanks to this file. If I click here, you can see that we have the same structure of that OpenAPI file that I showed you guys early in the slide. But in this case, we have with our information. So we have here like the information about the API, information about the paths, information about the responses of this path, what will be the parameters that I want to call it. Okay, so every information that our API has, it's important for us to send this information for the external world. We can see here. Okay, so after that, I think the first thing we have to do is actually to customize our application to send more data for everybody who wants to use it. Okay, so I'm going to customize it, including some information about the description of this API, and if anybody wants to contact me, I will also put my email address and where can he find me. Okay, a very nice thing to say also is this kind of two information here, which is very useful because the first one is telling me which is version I'm going to use in the API. So this API is the version 1.0, and what is the version of the OpenAPI specification? In that case, is the OpenAPI specification version 3.0. Okay, so let's start to customize our API. The first thing we have to do is stop here, go in our program, sorry, startup, and inside the SwaggerGen, we are gonna to add some information about our API. So we are gonna to .c. As you can see here, we get a lot of information, a lot of things that we can use. But for generate this information, the first thing we have to do is Swagger doc. Okay. The first parameter, which is asking me for to is the name of the Swagger doc. I'm gonna put the view1, okay, and I'm gonna to create a new OpenAPI info. That here I can actually put information about my API. So let's put some title. It will be the Hangouts Swagger API. Let's put some description about my API. So this is a API example for, okay. Also, let's get a contact class. So if anybody wants to reach me, I can actually be available. So name. And I don't know, let's put a version, okay, the version of our API. We can actually put other informations like license, extensions, terms of services. If I'd like to link a license that my company has or some terms of services that I have to accept it first for use this application, this is the place where where I'm going to put. Okay, so for this, let's stick with only this kind of information. And then when I save it and run it, as you can see, I don't know why my screen is going to that way, but we already have the information here. So as you can see, the name was changed. It's called now Hangout Swagger API with spaces. This is the description of the API, the API description for the Hangouts. And if you'd like to contact me, if you click here, it's going to redirect to my email for everybody who wants to send me an email. Okay. So for this first part of this Swagger configuration, this is the kind of thing that we can actually use it. But it's not very completed yet. I have here three kinds of operation that I don't know what will be the description, what kind of getting information it is going to get. I don't know what will be the response, the request. I don't know actually nothing about these operations. Okay, so in this next step, I will show how to actually put some information in this operation. Okay. So for us doing that, the first thing we have to do, is actually going in our solution here, properties, and enable the XML documentation file. Okay, it's a very important step because without this, it not will be generating the documentation about all the information that I like to share. Okay, and a pro tip is that we don't use it this route here. We don't use this path. We only stay with the application name because in this case the XML will be created on the root file of this folder here, the folder of the application. Okay. So after that, I only have to save it, and I have also to get on my startup here, and I have to tell the SwaggerGen that I'm going to use the Swagger XML file that I just created as the, the place where I'm going to be receiving the comments about my operations. So for that, I have to put some lines of code here. It's going to be very fast. XML file will be a assembly get execution assembly get name. I'm getting the name of the file here. Okay, and also I'm gonna put the path here. So path combine app context base director XML file, and now I'm gonna to say that c dot include XML comments, and I'm going to pass my XML path. So all my comments about all my operations will be listed here inside this XML path. Okay, let's run it just to see if it's going to be okay. The UI will be generated okay correctly. Okay, so we can see we don't have anything right now, but let's put something. So after we do this, as we can see, when you're gonna to go on our controller, our methods, we're gonna underline saying that is missing some XML information. Okay. For this, I'm not going to focus on this. I'm gonna just to comment in our operations, but it's very nice for you to get comment on every highlight that is going to show you for missing XML comment, because it gets more easy for everybody to understand your code. What kind of things are you doing in your code? Okay. So let's start putting some information in this get. Okay, so the first thing I would like to do is actually tell what kind of things I'm going to execute using this get. Okay, so if I uh, enter my slash 3 times, it will create a summary here. And this is the information I'm going to pass. For example, what kind of things this get is going to do. So for this example, this I don't know. Let's put this operation returns all the weather forecasts. Okay, I'm going to the returns will be an enumerator of weather forecasts. Okay, so when I do this and I'm going to run it, we can see that in our application we already have this kind of information here. This operation return all weather forecasts. Okay, so let's do this for all our operations. Okay, so for this post, so uh, this operation will post a weather forecast. The weather forecast class. Okay, and we return after I'm gonna to show the index example more ahead. Okay, and for this one also this operation will return a weather forecast based on a city. Okay, so the city name will return okay, so we already have all these three operations with the descriptions what will be the objective of them. Okay, as we can see, if we're gonna run it, as we can see here, for each of the operation we have the details, the description of this operation. So for this get, this operation returns all the weather forecast, for this post, and so on. Okay, but I think it's not very completed yet. Okay, uh, I know it's going to be a code 200 here, but I want to say that it's not going to be just a success. I want to say what's going to be the response for this guy. Okay, so in the next step, I'm going to uh, explain how to actually produce the responses. Okay, for each of these operations. So let's start. Let's stop here. So for this operation here, I'm gonna say that will produce application JSON. Okay. For this post, I think it's the same, but let's just stay with this one. Produces application JSON, and also I'm gonna to show how to actually put what kind of response types the HTTP types will be. So in this case, it can return produces return produces response type. Status code will be, I have to add this information here. Status code, sorry. Okay. In this case, we'll be returning a 200 OK, and also for the sake of this example, a 400 bad request. Okay, so for this operation, it will be returning a 200 OK and a 400 bad request. Okay. By doing this, I'm gonna only list this kind of information inside the get operation. But I'd like to show for everybody who is using this application what will be actually the information that's going to return. So for this, I already have this kind of annotation here, this kind of comments. It will be the response code, and I'm gonna put my response code here, which is going to be 200. Okay, and what will be the description of this return code? So for this example, the all the weather forecasts. And in the case of a 400, for example, 400, it will return uh, the weather forecast was not found. Okay, so by doing this, when we're gonna run it, the application, we can see that in our Swagger, we have this operation returns all the weather forecast, and we can actually see what will be the result for a 200, all the weather forecasts, and a 400, the weather forecast was not found. Okay. For example, let's try it out, this guy. So all you have to do is come here, try it out, and when I execute it, it will be returning this kind of information. As we can see here, we have the information about the CURL, the requested URL that was used, and the response. Well, the response was 200, and that's the response body. Okay, so as you can see here, we have a lot of information about date, temperature, and things like that. Okay, this is a very simple example of Microsoft. Okay, and the headers in case we would like to see what kind of the content was set, what kind of when, what kind of server, the transfer encoding, and things like that. Okay, and we can actually see when we add the 400, the bad request in our schema, a new schema appears, which is the problem details. As we can see here, we have a lot of information, what kind of classes the details will return. Things like type, title, status, detail, instance, and things like that. Okay, so it's very nice that we have this kind of information set up for our operation, because it's very useful for in a day-to-day usage of our API. So let's do this configuration for the response type for each of these operations here. Okay, so for the post, I'm gonna just copy here this information, and I'm going to change it, because it's not a status 200, it's a status 202, and the bad request will stay the same. And for this instance here, I'm gonna put this one, the 202. The weather is saved. The weather forecast is no. And also for the city weather here, I'm gonna get the same types here. Okay, a 200 here. So in that case, I will not respond of 400. Okay, just to explain to you guys. Okay, so now we have all the operations with the uh, operate with HTTP response types defined. Okay, and one thing is nice to everybody to know. In that case of a post, as we can see here, we have a class here that is posted. Okay, in this case, the weather forecast. And the nice thing about Swagger is when you put a class here on for the request parameter of a post, okay, or can be a get or whatever, we can actually have an example of this class here. So when I try it out here, you can see that it's open the weather forecast class with already all the information that I have to pass, like the date, the temperature, C, and the summary. Okay, so this is real nice because it already gives us an example, and all you have to do is to change this kind of information and execute it. Okay, in the example, I'm just going to just execute it. As we can see here, it returning a 202, which is already listed here for the weather forecast is saved. Okay, and a very nice thing to show you guys, I think, is we are coming to an end right now, is just to for this example of the city weather here. That's, as you can see, we have a parameter here which is the city name. When I try it out, if I don't pass anything here and execute it, the the return will be, it will be freezing in, I don't know, because we don't have the city name. The city name is used here on this method because with the name of the city, I'm going to return the random weather forecast and the city name. Okay. In that case, a very powerful and a very nice thing that we have to do for this case is to set this kind of field as a required. Okay, so this is the time where we can see actually the power of the Swagger UI, because using data annotations, when we set this information as required, the UI already compiles this information as required, and we can actually use this get information without sending the information of the city name. Okay, so let's do this. For this, I'm going to stop the API. I'm going to navigate through the class city here, and as you can see, we only have the city name here. The first thing I want to do is set a comment for the city name. For example, I want to explain for wherever the person who is using the application, what kind of information it has to pass it. So the name of the city. Okay, simple, but sometimes the simple is the easy way, is the most confident way that we like to follow. Okay, and after that, I'm going to put this data notation here, this required data notation. Okay, so when I put this required data notation here and execute my OpenAPI, execute my REST API, it will convert this required data notation for the UI validation. Okay, as you can see here, let's start. So we already have the city weather here. And as you can see, the city name now is required. We have this red, uh, red information here, and we actually can see the description that we put the name of the city. Okay, so if I try it out now without this information, when I try to execute it, the field already goes green, saying that is a required field. So I have to pass this information here. Okay, so for the example, I'm going to just put São Paulo, and let's see if this random is not so random. So it will be balmy in São Paulo. Okay, So I don't know if it's balmy, but bracing. So every time I execute it, will be that's the more appropriate for this one. It will be chilly. São Paulo is chilly right now. So if you guys seeing this in São Paulo, you'll be in chill or with a weather sweater. Okay. So uh, as you can see with some data notations, comments, and things like that, we can actually get a lot of information inside our APIs. Okay. As I said earlier, the Swagger is a very powerful and very nice tool. Uh, we can actually do a lot of things using Swagger. We can version our operationals with operational. We can actually put authorization tokens and things like that. So I think we came to an end here for all the things I'd like to present you guys. This is some very basic stuff, but I think from a perspective as a developer and QA, sometimes a person who'd like to dig into documentation, without this information, we'll be total lost because this kind of information is very useful for us to understand what kind of things our operation can do, what kind of things our API is capable of doing. Okay, so it's a nice start for everybody who wants to dive in a Swagger API documentation and read more about it. Okay, I have put some reference here. I'm gonna to share with you guys. So these are the basic reference that I use for this presentation. The first one is the Swagger IO, the application, the tool website. So after the OpenAPI, the third link is the getting started with the Swashbuckle and Swagger, which is very nice for you to understand how to use it, to install it, and we have a lot of information and example for this. And the two last ones, it's some courses on Plural site that actually can uh, show you guys how to create an open API Swagger, and after that, a more intermediated things like how can you use the Swagger file, the open API Swagger, to put inside a Postman and another type of testing code generation, okay, which I think is real nice. So I think for now, uh, this is the kind of thing that I like to show. It's very simple, but it's very powerful to everybody to get to know this kind of information. I think Swagger is going to be used a lot for us in the next few years, especially when it comes to creating microservices and things like that. Okay, so Swagger, I think, is the way to complement things and get things better with documenting and implementing things. Okay. I'd like to thank you all that stay until the end of this presentation. I'm gonna open the space here. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to question me. I can respond now. If you guys want to not not a question now. I have my teams. I'll share my email with you guys. So please feel free to actually, uh, I don't know, send some information about the content. If you guys like it, enjoy it, or even some doubts, I'll be happy to respond to you guys. Okay. I think that's it. Uh, that's it for today. I'm gonna just stay here with the Swagger open. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to say in the comment box here on our YouTube. Okay, I'm gonna to so I think we don't have any questions. I think it's nice because I think it's so in that case the content will be very ex- explained. So I'm gonna to resume this presentation. So once more, thank you guys, thank you Pedro, thanks Lilian, everybody from RDI, Fabiano. Also thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to share more knowledge with you guys, not only about Swagger but a lot of things that we are using in all the projects that we are doing here in RDI. Okay, so thank you all, stay safe, and that's it. Bye bye.